I'm Hazel Mitchell, 28, standing frozen at my father's 60th birthday dinner. The ultimatum hangs in the air: apologize to Rachel or leave forever. My sister sits smugly as our family watches, believing I stole her $150,000 inheritance. My fingers grip the chair, pride battling humiliation. Just as I turn to leave, Rachel unexpectedly stands, tears streaming down her face. Wait, she chokes out. I need to confess something. In that moment, 3 years of exile and family hatred came crashing down, and the revenge I'd been planning suddenly shifted targets. Before I dive into this wild story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our storytelling family. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for how this family drama explodes. The Mitchells were the picture-perfect American family, at least that's how it appeared from the outside. My father, William, built his construction business from nothing, turning it into one of the most successful companies in our county. He was demanding but fair, expecting excellence from his children just as he demanded it from himself. He taught us the value of hard work, integrity, and family loyalty, ironically the very values that would be weaponized against me later. My mother, Patricia, was the quintessential business wife, always impeccably dressed, hosting charity events, and maintaining our family's social standing in the community. She cared deeply about appearances and reputation. Perception is reality, Hazel, she would tell me whenever I questioned why we needed to keep up certain pretenses. Her obsession with how others viewed our family would eventually make it easier for her to believe the worst about me, rather than risk a public scandal. Then there was Rachel, my sister, just 2 years younger than me. She was the golden child, beautiful, charming, and seemingly perfect. She graduated with honors, was homecoming queen, and had a natural talent for making everyone adore her. My parents beamed with pride at everything Rachel accomplished. What none of us saw was how carefully she crafted this image, and how deeply the insecurity ran beneath her polished exterior. My brother Jason was the baby of the family, 5 years my junior. Easygoing and athletic, he typically followed Rachel's lead in family matters. He wasn't malicious, just impressionable, always wanting to be on the winning side of any family disagreement. As for me, I was the responsible one. I worked hard in school, graduated with a business degree, and joined my father's company in the finance department. I wasn't as socially graceful as Rachel, or as naturally talented as Jason, but I was dependable, honest, and straightforward. Perhaps too straightforward, as my habit of speaking my mind sometimes clashed with my mother's focus on maintaining perfect appearances. Our family lived in a sprawling colonial house in an affluent neighborhood, with summer vacations to Martha's Vineyard and Christmas ski trips to Aspen. The Mitchell name meant something in our community. We were regulars at the country club, donated generously to local charities, and my parents were invited to all the important social events. It was a privileged life, and I was grateful for it, even if I sometimes felt like I didn't quite fit the mold my parents had created. Looking back, I can see the subtle warning signs I missed. There was the time I came up with a marketing strategy for Dad's business, only to hear Rachel present it as her own idea at a family dinner a week later. Dad was impressed and Rachel got the credit. When I tried to speak up, she gave me this look just for a second, cold and challenging, before switching back to her sweet smile. "Oh, Hazel and I discussed it together," she said, making it sound like she was being generous by including me. Then there were the small things that went missing when only Rachel and I were home. My favorite earrings, a signed first edition book, cash from my wallet. Nothing I could definitively prove was taken, but enough to make me feel like I was going crazy. And the subtle ways Rachel would plant doubts about me to our parents. "Hazel seems so stressed lately. I'm worried about her." Or, "Did you notice how Hazel reacted to Mrs. Thompson? I hope everything's okay with her." Small comments dropped like breadcrumbs, creating a path of doubt about my stability and trustworthiness. But our family looked perfect from the outside. We smiled in family photos, celebrated holidays together, and supported each other at public events. I loved my sister despite our competition, and I never imagined she was capable of what would come next. None of us saw the cracks forming beneath the surface of our perfect family illusion, or how completely it would shatter. The beginning of the end started with my grandfather's death. He had been a shrewd investor and left a substantial inheritance to each of his grandchildren, $250,000 each, to Rachel, Jason, and me. It was life-changing money, especially for me, as I had been saving for a down payment on my own place. I planned to invest most of it and use a portion for a small condo, finally moving out of the family home at 25. Rachel had different plans for her windfall. Within months, she was driving a new Mercedes, wearing designer clothes, and taking weekend trips to New York City with her boyfriend Kyle. Kyle worked at a financial services firm and had expensive tastes that Rachel seemed determined to match. I noticed her spending seemed excessive even for $250,000. But it wasn't my place to comment on how she used her inheritance. 6 months after we received the money, Mom and Dad called a family meeting. I arrived to find everyone already seated at the dining room table, faces grim. The tension in the air was palpable. "Hazel," my father began, his voice unnaturally controlled. "We need to discuss something serious. Rachel's inheritance account is missing, $150,000. Before I could even process what this had to do with me, Rachel burst into tears. "Just tell the truth, Hazel, please. I won't even be mad if you just admit it and give it back." I stared at her in complete confusion. "What are you talking about?" My mother slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts of what appeared to be bank statements from an account in my name, showing transfers from Rachel's account totaling $150,000. There were also screenshots of text messages supposedly from me to someone named Alex, discussing how I needed money and planned to borrow from Rachel's account. "These were on your laptop," Rachel said through tears. "I was looking for that photo from Christmas to print, and I found these files." "That's impossible," I said, my voice rising as panic set in. "These are fake. I never sent these texts. I never opened any accounts. This is completely fabricated." My mother slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts of what appeared to be bank statements from an account in my name, showing transfers from Rachel's account totaling $150,000. There were also screenshots of text messages supposedly from me to someone named Alex, discussing how I needed money and planned to borrow from Rachel's account. Kyle, who had apparently been invited to this family ambush, spoke up. "Hazel, you told me 3 months ago that you were having financial problems and might do something you'd regret. I didn't know what you meant then, but now it makes sense." My father's face had turned to stone. "The evidence is pretty clear, Hazel. The transfers were made from our home IP address when Rachel was out of town with us in Florida. You were the only one here. Someone must have broken in or this is all made up." I was struggling to make sense of what was happening. "Dad, you know me. I would never steal, especially not from my own sister." Rachel sobbed harder. "I didn't want to believe it either. I checked everything multiple times. Why would you do this to me?" I looked around the table at my family's faces, my father's disappointment, my mother's distress, Jason's confusion, and Rachel's tears, and realized with horror that they all believed I had done this. In one calculated move, Rachel had turned my entire family against me. "I didn't take anything," I insisted, my voice shaking. "This is all a setup. Rachel is lying." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! The evidence is right here. You were always jealous of your sister. I never thought you'd stoop to stealing, but the proof is undeniable." "William," my mother interjected, "perhaps Hazel had some financial difficulties we don't know about. If she just returns the money—" "I don't have the money because I never took it," I shouted, standing up from the table. "I can't believe you're all falling for this." My father stood as well, his face red with anger. "I've heard enough. You have 2 choices, Hazel. Either admit what you've done, apologize to your sister, and return the money, or you can leave this house and this family." "Dad, please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I'm innocent. Rachel is setting me up." "Apologize or leave," he repeated, his voice ice cold. I looked at Rachel, who was being comforted by our mother, her face buried in Mom's shoulder but her eyes watching me over it. For just a second I caught a flash of something in her expression, satisfaction. In that moment I knew arguing further was pointless. They had already convicted me. "I will never apologize for something I didn't do," I said, my voice breaking. and I will never forgive you for believing the worst of me without even giving me a chance." I walked out of my childhood home that night with nothing but my purse and the clothes on my back. My father's final words followed me out the door. "Until you're ready to admit what you did and make amends, you are no longer welcome in this family." I spent that night in my car crying until no more tears would come, completely blindsided by how quickly my family had turned on me. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. Not only had Rachel stolen from our family and framed me, but my parents who had raised me, who should have known my character, had chosen to believe the worst, without even giving me the benefit of the doubt. The next day, I received a text from my father, informing me that my position at the family company was terminated, and that I had one day to collect my personal belongings from the house while they were all out. When I arrived, I found most of my possessions already packed in boxes in the garage. Just like that, I was erased from the Mitchell family. The months following my exile were the darkest of my life. I moved into a small, dingy apartment on the opposite side of town, the only place I could afford on short notice with my limited savings. The contrast between my new living situation and the luxury of my family home was jarring. My twin bed barely fit in the bedroom, and I could hear every argument my neighbors had through the paper-thin walls. The financial impact was immediate. Without my job at my father's company, I struggled to find employment. It seemed word had spread about my alleged theft, Rachel's careful work no doubt, and doors that should have been open to someone with my qualifications and experience were suddenly closed. Old friends stopped returning my calls. Invitations dried up. People I'd known my entire life would cross the street to avoid talking to me. The story of how I had stolen from my own sister and been disowned had spread through our social circle like wildfire, and no one wanted to associate with a thief, especially one who would steal from family. I fell into a deep depression. Some days, I could barely get out of bed. I questioned everything about myself and my reality. Had I somehow misremembered? Could I have done something in a blackout state that I didn't recall? The gaslighting was so complete that I began to doubt my own innocence. The isolation was crushing. I'd gone from being part of a tight-knit family with a wide social circle to being completely alone. I'd never realized how much of my identity was tied to being a Mitchell until that name and all its privileges were stripped away from me. 2 months into my exile, I managed to get a job as an administrative assistant at a small accounting firm, a significant step down from my previous position, but at least it paid the bills. It was there that I met Stephanie, a fellow assistant who would become my first real ally. I'd been keeping to myself, avoiding questions about my background or family, when Stephanie invited me to lunch one day. Something about her direct, no-nonsense manner broke through my defenses, and I found myself telling her everything. I expected disbelief or judgment. It was what I had come to expect from everyone, but instead, she listened without interruption. "I believe you," she said simply when I finished. 3 words I hadn't heard from anyone in months. I broke down crying right there in the sandwich shop. "Look," she continued, pushing a napkin toward me, "I've known pathological liars. My ex-husband was one. You're not showing any of the signs. And this sister of yours, she sounds like a textbook narcissist." Stephanie's background in psychology and her absolute conviction in my innocence began to rebuild what Rachel had so methodically destroyed my confidence. She helped me see that I wasn't crazy, that what had happened to me was a calculated attack by someone who knew exactly how to manipulate our family dynamic. "You need to stop focusing on proving your innocence to people who don't want to believe you," Stephanie advised. "Start gathering information about what really happened instead." With Stephanie's encouragement, I began to piece together what might have actually occurred. A mutual friend let slip that Rachel had been seen frequently at a casino about an hour from our town. Another mentioned that Kyle often bragged about his big wins when gambling online. It was the first real clue Rachel and Kyle might have gambling problems. The more I investigated, the clearer the picture became. Rachel had always been competitive with me, but I had underestimated how deep her jealousy ran. She didn't just want to succeed, she wanted me to fail. Framing me accomplished both. It gave her access to money she needed and removed me as competition for my parents' approval and affection. My sadness began to transform into something harder and more determined. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything I learned about Rachel's activities. I set up alerts for her name online and monitored social media accounts of mutual friends for glimpses into her life. I wasn't just trying to prove my innocence anymore, I was planning to expose her deception. 6 months into my exile, I met Max, an accountant at my firm, who became my second ally. After hearing my story from Stephanie, he offered his professional expertise to help track the money. Financial fraud leaves trails, he explained. If your sister stole that money, there's evidence somewhere. With Max and Stephanie's support, my focus shifted. The question was no longer how to get my family back, but how to bring the truth to light. The pain of betrayal had hardened into resolve, and that resolve had one clear purpose: revenge. Not violent revenge, but the kind that would hurt Rachel the most: exposure. I wanted everyone who had believed her lies to know exactly who she really was. I wanted my parents to face the horrible truth that they had cast out their innocent daughter while embracing a manipulative thief. I wanted Rachel to lose everything she had taken from me: family, reputation, trust. For the first time since that fateful night, I felt a sense of purpose. I might have been exiled, but I wasn't defeated. Not anymore. With newfound determination, I launched into a full investigation of Rachel's life. Social media became my window into her world, though it showed only the carefully curated version she wanted people to see. Rachel's Instagram feed was filled with expensive dinners, designer clothes, and luxury vacations, a lifestyle that should have been impossible after supposedly losing $150,000. She's not even trying to hide it, Stephanie remarked as we scrolled through photos of Rachel's weekend trip to the Hamptons. It's like she thinks she's untouchable. Max helped me track financial patterns, teaching me how to look for clues in the publicly available information. People who steal typically follow patterns, he explained. They get bolder over time, less careful about covering their tracks. Through a former colleague who still worked at my father's company, I learned that Rachel had been promoted to marketing director, the position I had been groomed for. The same colleague mentioned accounting irregularities in the marketing budget since Rachel took over, though nothing had been directly traced to her yet. The pieces were starting to come together, but I needed more concrete evidence. Through careful research, I discovered Rachel had a player's card at the Blue River Casino, registered under her email address. A cocktail waitress I befriended there confirmed Rachel was a regular, often betting thousands of dollars per night. She comes in with this guy, tall, dark hair, always wearing expensive watches, the waitress told me. They fight a lot when they lose. Last month security had to escort them out. Kyle. His sudden wealth made sense now too. A former classmate who worked at his financial firm mentioned Kyle had been splurging on his colleagues, buying rounds of $500 bottles at clubs, and hinting about investment strategies that were paying off big. 4 months into my investigation, I hit a stroke of luck. My parents had kept our old family computer in the garage when they upgraded systems. During one of their weekend trips, I convinced the teenage neighbor who had always liked me to let me into the garage to pick up some stored belongings my parents said I could have. The computer still worked, and more importantly, still had all the family email accounts configured. Rachel, always overconfident, had never changed her password from our shared family pattern. Her deleted emails folder contained correspondence with Kyle about their financial troubles, discussions about accessing emergency funds, and most damning, a draft of the fake text messages she would later plant on my computer. I copied everything to a flash drive, my hands shaking with a mixture of vindication and renewed anger. She had meticulously planned my downfall, deliberating over which words would sound most like me, discussing with Kyle how to make the forgery convincing. My next breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Alicia, one of Rachel's closest friends, reached out to me through a dummy social media account I'd created to monitor Rachel's circle. "I can't stop thinking about what Rachel did to you," her message read. "I've wanted to say something for a long time, but I was afraid. Rachel can be vindictive." We met at a coffee shop 2 towns over, where Alicia revealed that Rachel had confessed to her one night while drunk. "She said you had everything handed to you, that you didn't deserve your perfect life," Alicia explained nervously. "She said framing you was the only way to get what she deserved. And you've kept this to yourself all this time." I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Alicia looked down. Rachel threatened to reveal secrets about me if I ever told anyone. I'm not proud of staying silent. And you've kept this to yourself all this time. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. She said you had everything handed to you, that you didn't deserve your perfect life, Alicia explained nervously. She said framing you was the only way to get what she deserved. The investigation was taking an emotional toll. Some nights, reviewing the evidence of Rachel's elaborate betrayal, I would break down crying at how thoroughly she had destroyed my life and reputation. Other nights, I would lie awake planning exactly how I would expose her, imagining the look on her face when her lies finally came crashing down. After nearly a year of gathering evidence, I felt I finally had enough to confront Rachel. But just as I was finalizing my plan, Max discovered something unexpected while analyzing Kyle's visible financial patterns. Kyle's spending has changed, he pointed out, showing me credit card transactions visible on Kyle's barely private social accounts. Look at these hotel charges, all while Rachel was posting couple photos from their home. And these jewelry purchases aren't showing up in any of Rachel's photos. He's cheating on her, I realized. And possibly planning an exit strategy, Max added. These transfers to a new account started 3 months ago, small enough to fly under the radar, but consistent. This was it, the weak link in their alliance. If Kyle was planning to leave Rachel, he might be willing to turn on her to save himself. All my evidence pointed to both of them being involved in the fraud. But Kyle had less loyalty to my family and potentially more to lose professionally if his role was exposed. I had found my way in. It was time to make my move. I chose a Tuesday afternoon to confront Kyle, knowing from my surveillance that he typically took long lunches alone at a cafe near his office. Dressed in a business suit to blend in with the financial district crowd, I slid into the chair across from him, without invitation. "Hello, Kyle," I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "It's been a while." He nearly choked on his sandwich, eyes widening in alarm. "Hazel, what are you can't just..." "Relax," I placed a folder on the table. "I'm not here to make a scene. I just thought we should discuss a few things. Like your relationship with Brianna from the accounting department at your firm." His face drained of color. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Room 718 at the Westfield Hotel every Thursday afternoon for the past 2 months, I replied calmly, sliding a photo across the table, showing him entering the hotel with a woman who wasn't my sister. "And I have to say that $3,000 bracelet you bought her last month was quite generous. Does Rachel know about your extracurricular activities?" Kyle glanced nervously around the cafe. "What do you want, Hazel?" "The truth," I said simply. "I know you and Rachel framed me. I know about the gambling debts. I know everything, Kyle. And soon everyone else will too, unless you help me." "You're crazy," he whispered, but his shaking hands betrayed him. "Rachel told me you'd become unhinged, but this is..." "Is it unhinged to have copies of emails between you and my sister planning how to frame me?" I interrupted. "Or bank records showing where the money actually went? Or testimonies from casino staff who remember you both very well?" Kyle's composure cracked further. "You can't prove anything. I can prove enough to start a fraud investigation. I wonder how your firm would react to that, or the police. I'm sure they'd be very interested in those offshore accounts you've been moving money into." His eyes darted to the exit. "I need time to think." "You have 24 hours, I stated firmly, standing up. "Call me when you're ready to tell the truth. Otherwise, I start sending evidence to your boss, the police, and Rachel." As I walked away, I felt a surge of triumph. Kyle was the weak link, just as I'd suspected. His fear had been palpable. For the first time, I felt I had the upper hand. That feeling was short-lived. 6 hours later, as I was reviewing my evidence with Max in my apartment, my phone buzzed with a message from Kyle. "Meeting place has changed. Mill Creek Park, North Entrance, 9 p.m. tonight. Come alone or no deal." "It's a trap," Max said immediately. "He's had time to talk to Rachel." I know I agreed, but this might be my only chance to confront them both with evidence in hand. If I back down now, they'll know I'm serious and they'll start covering their tracks even more carefully. Despite Max and Stephanie's objections, I decided to go. I wasn't naive enough to go alone, however. Max agreed to park nearby as backup, and I kept my phone recording in my pocket. The park was eerily quiet when I arrived, just a few distant dog walkers and joggers. As I approached the meeting point, I spotted not just Kyle but Rachel and, to my shock, my brother Jason waiting by a picnic table. "Family reunion," I called out as I approached, trying to mask my anxiety with sarcasm. "I'm touched, you all came." Rachel stepped forward, her face a perfect mask of concern. "Hazel, this has gone far enough. Kyle told us about your threats and blackmail attempts." "Blackmail?" I laughed incredulously. "That's rich coming from the person who stole $150,000 and framed her own sister." See, Rachel turned to Jason. "This is what I've been dealing with. She's completely delusional now, making up even crazier stories." Jason moved toward me, his expression hard. "Hazel, you need help. We're all worried about you. These conspiracy theories stalking Kyle, creating fake evidence, it needs to stop." I realized then how thoroughly Rachel had manipulated the situation. She'd anticipated Kyle might waver, and had brought Jason as both protection and witness to my supposed instability. "Jason, she's lying to you," I said, desperately pulling out my phone. "I have proof, emails, bank records." "Fake documents won't help your case," Rachel interjected smoothly. "We know you've been contacting people from our lives, trying to turn them against us with doctored evidence." Kyle, emboldened by the backup, nodded. "You even photoshopped pictures of me to make it look like I'm cheating on Rachel. It's sick, Hazel." I felt the situation spiraling out of control. "Jason, please, just look at what I've found." Jason stepped closer, using his height to intimidate me. "The only reason I came tonight is to tell you to stop. Stop harassing our family, stop spreading lies, stop trying to hurt Rachel because you're jealous of her success." "Jealous," I sputtered. "She stole from me, stole my family, my reputation, my life." "You did that to yourself when you took her money," Jason replied coldly. The confrontation grew increasingly hostile. When I tried to approach Jason with my phone to show him evidence, he grabbed my wrist painfully. "Enough, Hazel." I pulled away and backed up, realizing this confrontation was futile. They had no intention of listening to anything I had to say. This meeting had only one purpose: to intimidate me into silence. "This isn't over," I warned, backing away. "The truth always comes out eventually." "Stay away from us," Rachel called after me, her voice carrying in the quiet park. "Next time we'll get a restraining order." I hurried back to my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. Max was there seconds later, having witnessed the confrontation from a distance. "Let's get out of here," he urged. "You're not safe." The next morning I discovered someone had scratched "thief" across the hood of my car. The day after, anonymous messages began arriving at my workplace, calling me unstable and dangerous. My boss called me in, expressing concerns about my personal issues affecting the workplace environment. Only Stephanie's intervention, vouching for my work performance and character, saved my job. "They're trying to isolate you completely," she observed as we sat in her apartment that evening. "Take away every support system you have left." I had never felt so defeated. The evidence I'd spent months gathering seemed useless against Rachel's ability to spin narratives and manipulate people. For a brief moment I considered giving up. Maybe even leaving town and starting fresh somewhere. Rachel couldn't reach me. "That's exactly what she wants," Stephanie said fiercely when I admitted these thoughts. "She wants you to disappear so her lies are never challenged." I knew she was right, but the path forward seemed impossible. Rachel had outmaneuvered me at every turn, anticipating my moves and countering them before I could gain any ground. How could I fight an enemy who controlled the battlefield so completely? That night alone in my apartment, I hit my lowest point since the original betrayal. But somewhere in that darkness, a new resolve began to form. If direct confrontation wouldn't work, I needed a different approach. Rachel had used my family against me. Perhaps it was time to find a way to use her own weapons against her. The call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was sorting through expense reports at work when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. My mother. I stepped outside to take the call, heart pounding, unsure whether to expect another accusation or more family drama. "Hazel." My mother's voice sounded older, more hesitant than I remembered. "I was wondering if we could meet." Just the two of us. We arranged to meet at a small cafe 2 towns over where no one would recognize us. I arrived early, choosing a corner table with a clear view of the door. When my mother walked in, I was struck by how tired she looked, the carefully maintained appearance that had been her trademark now showing visible cracks. "Thank you for coming," she said, settling across from me. She didn't try to hug me, which was just as well. I wasn't sure I could have accepted it. "Why now?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries. "It's been almost 2 years." She fidgeted with her wedding ring, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. "Things at home have been difficult. Rachel and Kyle are having problems. She's been erratic, spending money we can't track. Your father and I have been arguing about it. And this concerns me." How I kept my voice neutral, though my pulse quickened at this potential crack in Rachel's perfect facade. "I've started to wonder if..." She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. "I found something in Rachel's old room. Bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts, much larger sums than the inheritance. When I asked her about them, she became defensive, said I was invading her privacy." I carefully placed a folder on the table. "Like these?" My mother's hands trembled as she looked through the copies of records I'd gathered. "How did you get these?" "I've been investigating for over a year," I explained. "Rachel has a gambling problem, Mom. So does Kyle. They've been burning through money at casinos across 3 states. My mother shook her head. "Rachel doesn't gamble. She's always been so responsible with money." "The Rachel you think you know doesn't exist," I said firmly. "She crafted that person to manipulate you, just like she crafted the story about me stealing from her." I could see the struggle on my mother's face, the desire to defend Rachel warring with the evidence before her. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she finally admitted. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of my innocence, but it was the first crack in the wall of disbelief my family had built around me. I seized the opportunity to plant more seeds of doubt, sharing some but not all of my evidence. As we parted, my mother hesitated. "Your father's 60th birthday is next month. There's going to be a party at the house. Maybe you should come." "Dad made it clear I'm not welcome unless I apologize to Rachel," I reminded her. "I'm inviting you," she said with a flash of the quiet authority she'd always wielded in our family. Just think about it. That conversation changed everything. I no longer needed to find a way in. My mother had just offered me one. The birthday party would be the perfect setting to expose Rachel with the entire family and their social circle as witnesses. With renewed determination, I refined my strategy with Max and Stephanie. The direct approach had failed. This time, I would need irrefutable evidence and perfect timing. Max intensified his financial investigation. I've traced the money he announced one evening, spreading documents across my kitchen table. Rachel opened an offshore account in the Cayman Islands 3 months before accusing you. The initial deposit was exactly $150,000. "Can we prove it came from her inheritance?" I asked. "Better," Max grinned. "I found the transfer chain. She moved the money through 3 different accounts to obscure the trail, but the timestamps align perfectly. And look at this," he pointed to a series of withdrawals. Large cash withdrawals every weekend for 6 months, all at ATMs within a mile of various casinos. Meanwhile, Stephanie had been cultivating relationships with casino employees who remembered Rachel. The floor manager at Blue River confirmed Rachel was a high roller who lost big, she reported. She even showed me security footage of Rachel arguing with staff after being cut off at the tables. I secured copies of that footage through careful negotiation and a signed affidavit from the manager confirming Rachel's identity. The video clearly showed my sister in a near-violent confrontation after losing tens of thousands in a single night. The final piece fell into place when I discovered Kyle had been secretly documenting Rachel's gambling losses and erratic behavior, apparently as insurance for himself. His separate account had grown steadily, suggesting he was preparing to leave Rachel and wanted protection if she tried to blame him for their financial misdeeds. "He's planning his exit," Max confirmed after analyzing Kyle's visible transactions. "Setting up his own safety net while letting Rachel take most of the risk." I saw my opportunity. Using an anonymous email account, I sent Kyle selected evidence showing that Rachel had been discussing him with her lawyer, clearly planning to pin everything on him if they were ever exposed. I included just enough information to panic him without revealing the full extent of my knowledge. The response was immediate. Kyle and Rachel began arguing publicly. Mutual acquaintances reported tension between them at social events. Rachel started drinking more heavily, making mistakes at work, showing cracks in her carefully maintained image. As my father's birthday approached, I prepared meticulously. I compiled a dossier of evidence, financial records, witness statements, casino documentation, and the deleted emails revealing the original framing plot. I had it all professionally bound with an index and executive summary that even my financially illiterate brother could understand. Stephanie helped me prepare mentally and emotionally. "You'll need to remain calm no matter what happens," she advised. "If you lose control, it will only reinforce their narrative about your instability." "What if they still don't believe me?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "Then you walk away with your dignity intact, knowing you did everything possible to reveal the truth," she replied. "But Hazel cracks are already showing in Rachel's story. People are starting to see through her. The night before the party, I barely slept. 3 years of exile, nearly 2 years of investigation, countless hours of planning, all coming down to one confrontation. I wasn't just fighting to clear my name anymore. I was fighting to reclaim my story, my identity, and my right to the truth. Whatever happened at that birthday party would change everything. I was as ready as I would ever be. My father's 60th birthday celebration was being held at the family home, a place I hadn't set foot in for 3 years. As I parked down the street, my hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "You can do this," I whispered to myself, checking my appearance one last time in the rearview mirror. Stephanie had helped me choose my outfit, a sophisticated navy blue dress that projected confidence without appearing flashy or attention-seeking. My hair was styled in elegant waves, and I wore minimal jewelry. The overall effect was one of poise and maturity, miles away from the broken, exiled daughter who had fled this house in tears years ago. The evidence dossier sat in a slim leather portfolio beside me. I picked it up, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car. Walking up the familiar driveway felt surreal. Through the large windows, I could see guests mingling in the living room, family, friends, business associates, relatives from out of town. My stomach tightened at the thought of facing them all, knowing what they must think of me. Instead of ringing the doorbell, I entered through the side door that led to the kitchen, hoping to avoid an immediate confrontation. The catering staff was bustling around, none of whom recognized me. I slipped past them into the hallway where I nearly collided with my mother. "Hazel," she gasped, eyes widening. "You came." "You invited me," I reminded her, keeping my voice steady. For a moment she seemed uncertain what to do. Then, surprising me, she lightly touched my arm. "Your father doesn't know I invited you. He'll be surprised." "I'm counting on it," I replied. She gave me a searching look. "Please don't cause a scene, Hazel. It's his birthday." "I'm not here to cause a scene," I said truthfully. "I'm here for the truth." My mother pressed her lips together but nodded slightly before returning to her guests. I took that as permission to stay, and made my way to the edges of the main gathering. The reactions when people noticed me were exactly as I'd expected: shocked double takes, hushed whispers behind hands, a few outright glares. I held my head high, meeting each gaze with calm dignity. Let them stare. Let them whisper. I wasn't the same vulnerable young woman who had been driven out in shame. Across the room, I spotted Jason with his girlfriend. He froze when he saw me, then quickly whispered something to her before moving in my direction. "What are you doing here?" he hissed when he reached me. "Mom invited me," I replied. "It's Dad's birthday. I'm still his daughter, whether any of you want to acknowledge that or not." Jason looked uncomfortable. "Hazel, this isn't the time or place." "When is the time, Jason? It's been 3 years." Before he could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught our attention. My father had spotted me. His face flushed with anger as he made his way through the guests toward us. "Who invited you?" he demanded, keeping his voice low but intense. "I did." My mother appeared at his side, her hand on his arm. "William, please." Not here. My father's jaw clenched. We had an agreement, Hazel. Yes, I said evenly. You said I could come back when I apologized to Rachel for something I never did. I'm not here to apologize. I'm here because it's time for the truth. The truth, he scoffed. We know the truth. Do you? I challenged quietly. Where is Rachel, by the way, and Kyle? I noticed they aren't attached at the hip tonight. A flicker of discomfort crossed my father's face. Kyle couldn't make it. Rachel is. She'll be here shortly. I nodded, filing away this information. The separation was telling. To my father's credit, he didn't create a scene by throwing me out in front of his guests. Instead, he gave me a cold look. Stay if you must. But don't expect a warm welcome. As he walked away, I caught my mother giving me a complicated look, part concern, part curiosity, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Perhaps a glimmer of doubt about the family narrative. Over the next hour, I circulated carefully through the party, politely greeting old family friends, answering their awkward questions with grace. Many seemed surprised by my composure and articulate responses, a far cry from the unstable, resentful person Rachel had described. I overheard snippets of conversation about Rachel's recent behavior, her absences from work, arguments with Kyle at social functions, erratic spending patterns. The perfect image she had maintained was beginning to tarnish. Finally, nearly 2 hours into the party, Rachel arrived alone. She looked stunning as always in a designer dress, but there was a brittle quality to her smile, a nervousness in her movements as she kissed our father's cheek and made excuses for Kyle's absence. When she spotted me across the room, she froze momentarily before recovering. I saw her quickly approach our father, gesturing animatedly while glancing in my direction. He shook his head, saying something that made her face flush. Throughout dinner, Rachel kept shooting glances at me, clearly unnerved by my presence and composure. She drank steadily, finishing one glass of wine after another. I remained sober and watchful, waiting for the right moment. That moment came after dinner when my father stood to make a speech. The guests gathered in the living room, champagne glasses in hand, as he thanked everyone for coming and reflected on his 60 years of life. Family has always been my foundation, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The business success, the community recognition, none of it would matter without the support of my wonderful wife Patricia and my children who make me proud every day. He went on to specifically praise Rachel for stepping up in the family business, mentioning her recent promotion and contributions. My brother Jason received warm acknowledgement for his athletic achievements and recent engagement. I was conspicuously absent from his speech, a ghost daughter erased from the family narrative. As applause filled the room, Rachel shot me a triumphant look, swaying slightly from too much wine. In that moment I knew it was time. My father had just finished extolling the virtues of family loyalty and integrity, principles he'd abandoned, when he chose to believe the worst about his own daughter without evidence. When he asked if anyone else would like to say a few words, I stepped forward. The room fell silent. I'd like to say something, I announced, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. All eyes turned to me, the room suddenly thick with tension. My father's face darkened, but before he could object, I continued. For those who don't know me, I'm Hazel Mitchell, William and Patricia's oldest daughter. 3 years ago, I was accused of stealing my sister Rachel's inheritance money and subsequently disowned by my family. Uncomfortable murmurs rippled through the crowd. My mother's face had gone pale, while Rachel gripped her wineglass so tightly I thought it might shatter. I've respected my family's wishes and kept my distance, I continued. But I'm here today because the truth matters, especially in a family that claims to value integrity above all else. I opened my portfolio and removed the first document, a detailed financial analysis of Rachel's offshore accounts. 3 years ago, Rachel reported that $150,000 had been stolen from her inheritance. What she didn't mention was that she had transferred that exact amount to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands 3 months before accusing me. This is ridiculous, Rachel interjected, her words slightly slurred. She's making things up because she's jealous of my success. I remained calm. I have the account numbers, transaction dates, and authentication codes that prove otherwise. I also have evidence that Rachel and her boyfriend Kyle have been frequent visitors to casinos across 3 states, losing substantial sums of money that mysteriously disappeared from company accounts after Rachel's promotion. My father stepped forward. Hazel, that's enough. This is neither the time nor— When is the time, Dad? I interrupted. When the company is bankrupt because Rachel gambled away the profits. When Kyle takes what's left and disappears, because that's exactly what he's planning to do. I remained calm. I have the account numbers, transaction dates, and authentication codes that prove otherwise. I also have evidence that Rachel and her boyfriend Kyle have been frequent visitors to casinos across 3 states, losing substantial sums of money that mysteriously disappeared from company accounts after Rachel's promotion. Speaking of Kyle, I continued scanning the room. I notice he's not here tonight. Strange, since he never misses a family event. Could it be because he's realized Rachel is setting him up to take the fall when her financial house of cards collapses? Rachel lurched to her feet, face contorted with rage. Shut up! You don't know anything about my life. I know you've been lying for 3 years, I replied steadily. I know you framed me because you needed money to cover gambling debts. I know you've been embezzling from Dad's company to feed the same addiction. I turned to my father. I have witness testimonies, casino records, bank statements, and deleted emails that prove everything I'm saying. I didn't come here to disrupt your birthday, Dad. I came because I love this family enough to save it from Rachel's destructive behavior, even after you all turned your backs on me. The room had gone completely silent. My father's face was ashen as he looked between Rachel and me. She's lying, Rachel insisted, but her voice had lost its conviction. She's always been jealous of me. She's trying to turn you against me because she wants her position in the company back. Actually came a voice from the doorway, she's telling the truth. All heads turned to see Kyle standing there looking haggard and conflicted. Kyle, Rachel gasped. What are you doing? He stepped into the room, avoiding Rachel's gaze. I can't do this anymore, Rachel. The lies, the cover-ups, the gambling, it's out of control. Don't you dare, Rachel hissed, but Kyle continued. We did frame Hazel, he admitted, addressing my father directly. Rachel was losing thousands at the casinos. She took the money from her inheritance, then panicked when you started asking questions about her spending. Framing Hazel was her idea. The collective gasp in the room was audible. My mother put a hand to her mouth, tears filling her eyes. That's not true, Rachel shrieked. Kyle's lying, he's the one who gambled away the money. I have proof, Kyle said quietly. Email exchanges, voice recordings where we discussed the plan. I kept everything as insurance because I knew eventually you'd try to blame it all on me. Rachel's face contorted with fury. She lunged at Kyle, knocking over a nearby side table in the process. You backstabbing piece of— Rachel! My father's voice thundered through the room. Stop this immediately! But Rachel was beyond reason. Years of careful deception were unraveling before her eyes, and with it her carefully constructed identity as the perfect daughter. Fine, she screamed, whirling to face the shocked crowd. You want the truth? Yes, I took the money. I framed Hazel. Are you happy now? The silence that followed was deafening. My father stared at Rachel as if seeing her for the first time, the color draining from his face. Why? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel laughed bitterly. Why? Because Hazel always had everything so easy. She was your favorite, always so perfect, so honest, so hardworking. No matter what I accomplished, it was never enough to measure up to precious Hazel. She turned to me, years of bottled resentment pouring out. You never had to try, everything came naturally to you, school friends, Dad's approval. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow? Always being compared and found wanting. That's not true, Rachel, my mother interjected. We never compared you. You didn't have to say it, I could see it in your eyes whenever Hazel succeeded at something. The pride, the perfect firstborn daughter. She spat the words. I had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. My father sank heavily into a chair, looking suddenly old. So you stole money, framed your sister, and let us cast her out. Because you were jealous. It wasn't supposed to go that far, Rachel said, her anger giving way to desperation as she realized the full impact of her confession. Kyle and I just needed the money temporarily. But then you all believed me so easily, and it was. It felt good to finally be the one you trusted, the one you sided with. Jason had moved to stand beside me, his face a mask of shock and dawning horror. Rachel, how could you? Hazel is our sister. Oh, shut up, Jason, Rachel snapped. You were happy enough to believe it too. None of you questioned it for a second. What does that say about this so-called loving family? She wasn't wrong. The painful truth hung in the air, how quickly they had all turned against me, how eagerly they had accepted the worst about me. My father stood up shakily. Everyone, please excuse us. This is a private family matter. The guests, many of whom were longtime friends and business associates, awkwardly began to gather their belongings. The damage to our family's reputation was already done. Rachel's confession had been public and unmistakable. As the last guest hurried out, Rachel made a move toward the door, but my father's voice stopped her. Don't even think about leaving. We're going to discuss this right now. She turned a trapped animal looking for escape, and her eyes locked with mine. For a brief moment I saw something I never expected, a flicker of genuine remorse quickly replaced by defiance. What's there to discuss? She challenged. You know the truth now. Hazel's innocent. I'm the villain. Happy ending. This is far from a happy ending, my father replied heavily. The police will need to be involved. The company finances will have to be audited. Rachel blanched. You wouldn't turn in your own daughter. My father looked at her with profound sadness. I already did 3 years ago. I just had the wrong daughter. In that moment, as the full weight of her actions crashed down around her, Rachel finally broke. The carefully maintained facade crumbled completely, and she collapsed into a chair, sobbing without restraint. The room fell silent, except for her cries, none of us quite knowing what to do next. 3 years of lies, betrayal, and misplaced trust had left wounds too deep to be healed in a single night. My mother was the first to move, coming to stand beside me. Without a word, she took my hand and squeezed it, a simple gesture of apology and reconnection. Jason followed, wrapping me in a bear hug. I'm so sorry, Hazel, he whispered, voice thick with emotion. I should have known. I should have believed in you. My father remained where he was, looking broken and aged beyond his 60 years. His entire worldview had just been shattered, his perfect family revealed as a lie, his judgment proven catastrophically wrong. The police arrived 30 minutes later, responding to Kyle's call. He had already provided them with evidence of the financial crimes, hoping for leniency in exchange for his cooperation. Rachel was taken for questioning, her tear-streaked face a stark contrast to the confident woman who had entered the party hours earlier. As the officers led her away, she looked back at me one last time. I never meant for it to go this far, she said quietly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I nodded, but said nothing. Words seemed inadequate in the face of what had transpired between us. Perhaps someday I would find forgiveness in my heart, but that day was not today. The family stood in silence as the police car drove away, taking with it the daughter who had nearly destroyed us all with her lies. The birthday celebration had become something else entirely, the painful birth of a new truth, and with it, the tentative beginning of healing. A month after my father's birthday party, I sat in the small conference room of a family therapist's office, watching my parents and Jason settle into their chairs. The formal charges against Rachel had been filed the week before: fraud, embezzlement, and filing false police reports. Kyle had negotiated a plea deal in exchange for his testimony, receiving probation and community service rather than jail time. These weekly therapy sessions had been my condition for attempting reconciliation with my family. If we were to rebuild any semblance of trust, we needed professional help navigating the damage done. I'd like to start today by acknowledging the progress you've all made, Dr. Bennett began. It's been a difficult month of revelations and adjustments. My father nodded stiffly. Of all of us, he struggled the most in these sessions. His self-image as a fair, discerning man of integrity had been shattered by the realization that he had cast out an innocent daughter while embracing a manipulative one. The formal audit of the company had revealed Rachel had embezzled over $300,000 beyond the initial inheritance money, primarily from marketing budgets she controlled after her promotion. William, Dr. Bennett said gently, "You mentioned last week that you wanted to address something with Hazel directly." My father cleared his throat, uncomfortable with emotional vulnerability but determined to push through it. "Yes," he said, turning to face me. "Hazel, I've spent weeks trying to find the right words to express how profoundly sorry I am for what happened. As your father, I should have been your strongest advocate. Instead, I became your prosecutor, judge, and executioner without giving you a fair hearing." His voice cracked slightly. "I failed you, in the most fundamental way possible. My pride, my certainty that I could always discern the truth, it blinded me to what should have been obvious, that the daughter I raised to value honesty and integrity would never have done what Rachel accused you of." It was the most direct apology he had offered, and I could see how much it cost him to make it. My father had always been stoic, viewing emotional displays as weaknesses. "Thank you," I said simply. I needed to hear that. It was the most direct apology he had offered, and I could see how much it cost him to make it. My father had always been stoic, viewing emotional displays as weaknesses. My father cleared his throat, uncomfortable with emotional vulnerability but determined to push through it. "Yes," he said, turning to face me. "Hazel, I've spent weeks trying to find the right words to express how profoundly sorry I am for what happened. As your father, I should have been your strongest advocate. Instead, I became your prosecutor, judge, and executioner without giving you a fair hearing." My mother reached across to take my hand. "I keep thinking about all the holidays, birthdays, and family moments we lost, time we can never get back. I should have trusted my instincts when things didn't add up, but I was so afraid of disrupting the family peace." "And your family avoids open conflict at all costs," Dr. Bennett observed. Jason, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Except when it came to Hazel. We had no problem conflicting with her." He looked at me apologetically. "I think because you've always been the most straightforward one, the most willing to call things out, you became the safe target. We knew you could take it. It was an insight I hadn't considered, that my strength had somehow made me more vulnerable to becoming the family scapegoat. I'm learning to set boundaries," I told them. "I love you all, and I'm committed to rebuilding our relationship, but it will be on different terms. I need to know that you respect my perspective even when it differs from yours. I need to know you'll give me the benefit of the doubt." My father nodded slowly. "You've earned that 1,000 times over." We discussed the practical aspects of moving forward, my possible return to the family business, which I was considering but hadn't decided on the upcoming holidays, and how to handle the inevitable community gossip about Rachel's situation. After the session, Stephanie and Max were waiting for me at our favorite coffee shop. These two people who had stood by me when my own family hadn't remained my closest confidants and support system. "How'd it go?" Stephanie asked as I slid into the booth. "Better than expected," I admitted. "Dad actually apologized. Like, really apologized. Not just a generic, sorry for what happened, but took specific responsibility." "That's huge," Max commented, sliding a latte toward me. "Are you thinking about taking the CFO position he offered?" I shrugged. "Still deciding. Part of me wants to, but another part thinks it might be healthier to build my career somewhere else. The company will always be associated with some painful memories. Whatever you decide, it should be what's best for you, not what makes them feel better," Stephanie advised. She was right, of course. One of the most valuable lessons from this ordeal was learning to trust myself and prioritize my own well-being. The people who truly loved me would support my choices even when those choices weren't convenient for them. A week later, I received news of a job offer from a prestigious financial firm in Boston, an opportunity that would utilize my skills while giving me the fresh start I craved. When I told my parents about my decision to accept it, they were disappointed, but supportive. "We'll miss having you nearby," my mother said, "but we understand why you need this." My father nodded. "You've more than earned the right to chart your own course, Hazel. Just know, there will always be a place for you here if you want it." It was a small but significant demonstration that our relationship was evolving in healthier directions. I visited Rachel once before moving to Boston. She was awaiting sentencing, living under house arrest at a small apartment, a dramatic downgrade from her previous lifestyle. "I didn't expect to see you," she said when she opened the door, genuine surprise in her voice. "I needed closure," I explained, taking a seat on her worn couch. "And I wanted to understand." For 2 hours we talked more honestly than we ever had before. Rachel described how her jealousy had festered over years, how she had created an elaborate self-narrative where I was the favored child and she was perpetually overlooked. The gambling had started as an escape, then spiraled into an addiction she couldn't control. "I never planned to hurt you so badly," she admitted. "It started as a temporary solution to cover the gambling losses, but then it snowballed. The more everyone believed me, the harder it became to turn back." "Did you ever consider confessing?" I asked. She looked away. "A few times, especially when I heard how much you were struggling. But by then I was in too deep. Admitting the truth meant losing everything: Mom and Dad's trust, my job, possibly facing charges. It was easier to keep pushing the lie. I didn't offer forgiveness, and she didn't ask for it. Some betrayals run too deep for simple resolution. But there was value in understanding, in seeing the human weakness behind the monstrous actions. Rachel wasn't evil, she was deeply flawed, insecure and addicted, making increasingly desperate choices to maintain her facade. "I hope you find peace, Rachel," I said as I left. "And the help you need." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I hope Boston brings you everything you deserve, Hazel." 6 months later, as I settled into my new life in Boston, I hosted a small dinner party in my apartment. Stephanie and Max had flown in for the weekend, and my parents and Jason drove up from Connecticut. It wasn't perfect, there were still moments of awkwardness, topics we carefully avoided, and the conspicuous absence of Rachel, who was serving her 18-month sentence. But as I looked around the table at these people who had played such different roles in my journey, from betrayers to steadfast allies, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the wisdom this ordeal had given me. I had learned the pain of betrayal but also the strength of resilience. I had experienced the crushing weight of false accusations but also discovered my capacity to stand alone in my truth. I had felt the bitter sting of family rejection but found the sweetness of chosen family who loved me unconditionally. Most importantly, I had learned that forgiveness isn't a single act but a process, sometimes a lifelong one, and that it's possible to love people while still holding them accountable for the harm they've caused. The path to healing wasn't straight or simple. There were still days when anger and resentment resurfaced, when I questioned whether maintaining family relationships was worth the emotional effort. But I had discovered that true strength lies not in cutting people off or holding grudges, but in the courage to remain open to connection while protecting your boundaries and sense of self. As we raised our glasses in a toast to new beginnings, I realized that the exile that once seemed like the end of my world had ultimately led me to a life more authentic and relationships more genuine than I might have otherwise known. The truth had indeed set me free, though not in the way I had originally imagined. Some wounds never fully heal, but they can transform us in unexpected ways, making us more compassionate, more discerning, and ultimately more at peace with the complex, imperfect nature of human relationships and the families that shape us. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you deeply trusted? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's going through something similar. Right now, don't forget to like this video if Hazel's journey resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories of resilience and family dynamics. And share with someone who might need to hear this message of truth and healing. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most painful experiences can lead to the most profound growth. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.